I'm Eric Barden.
I'm Amy Barden.
And this is another episode of Bombarded. Today, we are welcoming Brandi Kruse, an independent journalist, very successful independent journalist in the greater Seattle area and probably abroad as well. I only know about the Seattle part. Brandi was formerly a reporter for a local news agency and branched out on her own and did her own thing. We're excited to talk to her about that journey, why she left the news station, and sort of a general assessment of media and sort of the public's trust in the information that they're getting. So what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I'm
Brandi?
excited to talk to her. She's actually, I know her. We've been at nonprofit events before, but she's never interviewed me. And so I'm really excited
Well,
actually
you
to
can
ask
interview
her.
her.
Exactly. I prefer that
Turning
position.
the tables on her.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I really value candor and transparency and people who will just call balls and strikes. So I think she'll be fun to question.
Yeah, it'll be good. She's not shy, and we like that about her.
Yeah.
Prepare to be bombarded. Well, welcome, Brandi. We're glad to have you.
I'm excited. Am I excited? Are you going to bombard me with questions?
You are about to
Okay.
be bombarded, for
Great.
sure.
Oh, I love it. Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of folks don't mind it once they've had it done.
Well, she's
Once or
used to
twice.
being on the other side.
It is. I actually really, I love answering questions because I always want to know what other people would ask me because
Right.
I have to spend so much time asking people questions. So I'm excited.
Right. Well,
Don't hold back.
Yes. Well, that's one of the reasons we're really excited to have you is because we know that you're a straight shooter. You tell it like it is, and you've got a lot of great insight. And one of the topics that Amy and I talk about around the dinner table, and I think it's something
Argue
that,
about.
it's something I think that many folks are sort of long for a day when media was perhaps, and maybe it's just folklore, maybe media never was, and I've got a story that I'm going to tell you about that from the 80s, but maybe media never was sort of held to journalistic standards of sort of substance with a limited amount of editorializing. I think we can agree that everybody has bias and everybody has a lens through which they see things, but we have this idea now that all of mainstream media outlets and, frankly, all outlets have a perspective that their viewership expects from them. And so you don't get sort of a breadth of information about a topic. You get an angle on a topic.
Yeah.
And so the first question is, Walter Cronkite, everybody's pillar of journalistic ethics. Was that less partisan than what we see now? Or what do you think?
So there's a lot of history here. And I like the direction things are going, and we can get into that. There's some that good, there's some bad, even about what I do. But people have to remember that the First Amendment and the free press and this whole idea, when it was born in this country, there was something called the pamphleteers. And you should, if you're not familiar with the history of it, it's actually pretty fascinating. But the pamphleteers were the original reason why we needed a First Amendment. I mean, these were citizens who were very intent on breaking from the monarchy, trying to push the nation towards independence. And they were literally handing out pamphlets. I mean, handing them out to people, trying to encourage them, like we need to move toward independence. And so the very earliest examples that we have in this country of a true free press were the pamphleteers. So, this idea that at somewhere in the arc of history, we held up journalism as the people who were unbiased completely, didn't push back against the government in the sense that we do now, is sort of a falsehood, right? We got there, but I don't actually believe that's the most effective form of media that our founding fathers really intended to protect. It's a little too passive for my liking. So it depends on what your version of journalistic free press is. I like the version when we founded this country because it's a little more hardcore in my opinion. Walter Cronkite, I wasn't alive during his time. I think he probably did a good job if your traditional
Eric,
sense
you remember
is.
him, though, right?
Yes. Tell us
Yes,
what
I do.
Walter
Yes,
was like on the
me and
news.
Walt.
Yes. But, I do believe that there was a period when I'll give you the kind of weird story about why I wanted to do news. I had a very dysfunctional home life, a lot of domestic issues between my parents, but for some reason every evening, it would be like you could be in a knockdown, drag-out fight, but then everybody would have to stop and watch the evening news for 30 minutes. So that, I think, to me, I'm not a psychologist, but it became this really peaceful part of my day in an environment that wasn't very peaceful. And I would see these war correspondents in all these places in the world, and I thought, well, if I could be there, I wouldn't have to be here. So from 6th grade on, everything I did was, really, I wanted to be a war correspondent. I wanted to travel the world and cover the news. And war in a different kind of way. And I quit some of my sports. I started speech and debate and did all these things and went through college really believing in the fundamentals of journalism and the role of the free press. And then came to be very disillusioned with what I had bought into.
So that is that's a great segue. Thank you for setting us up.
You're welcome.
So you became a part of the press corps, and what was that experience like?
So I started in radio news. That's what I went to college for at the University of Nebraska. So I do have an actual degree in journalism and mass communications, which, reflecting on it, is the stupidest thing ever. Don't ever get a degree in journalism. I think it's such a waste of money. What I've come to realize, you can't teach somebody to be a journalist. You can't teach somebody to be curious, to be independent-minded. That just comes naturally. It's something you can improve upon, but you have to be passionate about being curious and demanding answers. And so I always tell young, want to be journalists, don't major in journalism, major in something specific, political science, whatever it is, become an expert in an area.
A topic,
and then pursue journalism in that realm. So one of my very first jobs was at the CBS radio affiliate in Seattle, which is called Cairo Radio. And I got hired right out of college. The news director had known me from a college journalism competition and basically said, do you want to come out to Seattle? I'd never been to Seattle. They flew me in for a day. And I was like, sure.
Where are you from?
Minnesota.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, by Fargo, North Dakota. So the O's and the A's come out occasionally. But so I came out. I worked in radio news, covered police a lot. I was on the crime and justice beat.
Yeah.
So I was down at City Hall, down at the first appearances, down at the courthouses. And that's a much more straightforward kind of job in journalism. Because I'm covering crime, okay? I'm covering these ins and outs, and there's not too much room, or there wasn't then, for politicizing it. Obviously, policing became very political, but I did that for 3 years. The news director at the Fox affiliate in Seattle recruited me to go do TV. And so I came over there to do investigative reports. And then ultimately around 2015, when everybody became absolutely obsessed with politics because of Donald Trump, they transitioned me into covering politics full time.
Oh, interesting. So how much did you know about law enforcement before you started to cover it?
Oh, very little. I think it's something I just sort of fell into. This was around the time when the Seattle Police Department was entering the consent decree, which
don't trigger Eric.
Feels like I don't mean to trigger you, but it is forever ago. This was also around the time that the Occupy movement was taking off across the country.
Those
so
were good times.
I like to tell people for the last 15 years, I've been a professional protest coverer because I've been through all the Occupy, BLM, Summer of Love, all that stuff.
One of the most famous local protest coverers of all time, I think.
It has got me assaulted quite a bit, it turns out.
I've seen, even as of late.
Yeah, being Antifa public enemy number one has its downsides. Although I don't think I'm enemy number one anymore. I think my friend Jonathan Cho has taken that over for me.
He's really taken it up a notch.
Yeah, he has. So I did that in terms of going into politics. That was also just this natural transition because policing became very political.
Very political.
So we were often doing stories, trying to hold politicians accountable and police accountable. And so when everybody's just, obsessed with Donald Trump, then it's like, okay, we're going to cover politics full time.
Yeah.
And then you eventually made a decision to go out on your own.
Yeah.
And so what led to that? What led to that decision?
So I'm personally, if you don't count, 20 years old to 25 years old when everybody is a liberal, because you just haven't grown out of it yet, no offense. And so when I was...
She's 22. You're 22.
I love that.
Maybe in 3 years.
Yeah, maybe you'll grow out of it soon. Soon you'll grow out of it, it's fine. I try to offend the host within the first 5 minutes.
No, we like that. We like that.
You know,
It's
I was always right of Seattle Center.
Yeah.
And
that's
Seattle
not
Center is
right.
very
Yeah.
far left,
Yeah.
right? But I became frustrated for a lot of reasons with news coverage. And, you know, early on, first of all, everybody has their political opinions. Every single reporter, no matter how much they want to pretend that they're unbiased, whatever it is. No, they all have their political opinions. They carry it with them to work every single day. It's your job to identify what your opinion is about a story you're covering so you're better able to set it aside and be fair. And I think that's where a lot of the media has lost its ability to even acknowledge that they have a bias that's, you know, driving them so deeply. So I became frustrated with a lot of things. The treatment of the Seattle Police Department was a big frustration to me. You know, I had been on probably 50 plus ride-alongs with SPD over the years covering crime. I saw individuals who were doing their jobs with integrity, with honesty, in a very difficult political environment. And it just didn't reflect what I was seeing in the media for the most part. Not to say that SPD didn't do some things worthy of criticism. So that was very bothersome to me. The city's handling of the riots had become increasingly less heavy-handed. You know, we went from 2011 to 2016, like guns blazing, and I saw their behavior firsthand, and to me it really warranted a strong response. And all of a sudden, especially in 2020, we saw this very hands-off approach. No, by all means, take over 6 square blocks of the city, throw stuff at police, try to lock them in a building and start it on fire.
Light
You're the good
dumpsters
guys,
on fire,
right?
yeah.
There had been this excusal of far-left political violence for a very long time, and my sort of wake-up, what started to get me to think about leaving, and this is going to sound crazy, it was January 6th. So I had been an early TDSer, Trump derangement syndrome. I was very, very anti-Donald Trump. And so it's weird that January 6th, which is probably one of the lowest moments for Donald Trump, was actually the moment that started to wake me up to not hate him as much, and also started to wake me up to really how far the media had fallen. And I know that sounds crazy, but let me sort of explain. Yeah. The 6 months before that had been the most insane 6 months of my journalistic career in Seattle. You know, we watched the city be taken over by far-left extremists. People have probably remembered the video, my security guard disarming rioters of stolen police rifles while I hid behind a potted plant. And then to go home that night, and he was a stud. Marines are studs. Yeah. And then to watch people in the media act as if that didn't happen, or we were lying about it, or whatever it was. You know, cops' cars lit on fire in the streets, and then to have it characterized as sort of this mostly peaceful event. And then you fast forward to CHOP, where
mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful,
mostly peaceful.
Mostly
Other
peaceful.
than the arsons.
Fiery, but mostly peaceful.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward to CHOP, and my crew was mobbed pretty severely the first night of CHOP. When it was formed, we had to seek refuge in a fire station. And then, like, even my own colleagues, you know, watching the news that night, in my opinion, were dramatically downplaying what happened. And so I just got through 6 months of that, and it actually took a huge emotional toll on me as well. I mean, I was having panic attacks out in public after all of that. And then I saw the reaction to January 6th. Now, I thought the reaction to January 6th was appropriate. I thought it was an embarrassing day for our country. Things could have been obviously handled better by the president. But I was comparing
100%.
it to what I had just watched be downplayed for 6 months. And I thought to myself, no fucking way you guys don't see the hypocrisy here. There is no way. I mean, we had city council members excusing vandalism, violence on the front lines, vilifying police, things on fire, left-wing agitators handing out AR-15 rifles out of the trunk of their car to random people in a state that just banned them for people who are law-abiding. And I'm watching that, and I'm comparing it to January 6th, and it was my wake-up like, it's dripping with hypocrisy. So I was fine with the way they were reacting to Donald Trump, but I saw this atmosphere where the left controlled so much of the narrative that it was like, we can do and get away with exactly what they did. And I understand there's other elements about, you know, the democracy or whatever it is, but to me, political violence is political violence. And I really saw this inability to just recognize it for what it was. And then you folded that in with the response to the pandemic. First 3 months of the pandemic, I was like, by all means, let's do what needs to be done. Stay inside. The masking thing is funny, whatever. And then when they started to push into the, endless emergency rule by the governor, vaccine mandates, where we were going to fire dedicated members of law enforcement and first responders, over a vaccine that it was already realized that it wouldn't actually stop the spread of the virus. It wasn't what was promised to us. And the inability of my colleagues in the media to just look at some of those things and say, hey, we've got a period of time in our country where government at all levels is exerting this profound influence over people's lives and livelihoods. And that is what the free press was meant for, to push back, to ask questions, even if you personally agree or are vaxxing or whatever. And the inability to do that was sort of the seal for me.
Yeah.
Where it was almost like this de facto, we just have to go with it.
Right.
We just have to go with it. And I thought, that's not what our jobs are.
So you mentioned earlier, and I think this is absolutely true of all people, that journalists have their own particular bias.
Yeah.
And we all do. We all have a lens through which we see things. It's based on our experience, our training, our upbringing, whatever it may be. But my perspective is that it goes beyond that. So, and you just said that journalists felt like we just got to kind of go along with the narrative. But when you were in local journalism, and I've also talked to folks currently in journalism in the Seattle area who've told me, no, I have to have a different take than that. That take, Eric, you just gave me, that's not going to make it through.
We both get that. I agree with you, but I can't print that.
Yeah. So to me, it's not just that journalists have an independent perspective. It's that there's an expectation from the employer for a particular perspective.
Yeah. There is a wide variety of things going on here. Some of it is incompetence. Some of it is, this is like the easiest to explain stuff. Inexperience, incompetence, laziness. Being short-staffed and overworked. So a lot of what you see that's really sloppy, journalism, be it on TV or in newspapers, it's like people who have too much of a deadline, they're just write it as fast as they can, or young reporters who were hired because you can hire them at $60,000 a year. They have no clue about the history of the city or politics, so they have no institutional knowledge to base their reporting off of. I can give a million examples of that. So a lot of it is that, and I want to be fair. The other thing is it's just documented that, I think the number is like 80% of mainstream media members across the country self-identify as Democrats. I mean, there's been like polling on this, blind polling. So the bias is there, right? Now, I will say, for the record, not once in my career at Fox 13 was I ever told, you cannot report that. Yeah. And that's a common question I get. And it would be much better for my narrative if I said they told me what to say all the time. Yeah. It never happened. I had a tremendous amount, and I think I'd earned it, a tremendous amount of latitude. I had a show that I did on Sundays that like the buck stopped with me. Nobody else was telling me what was going to be put on the show. When they started to hint that they wanted to, that's one of the reasons I left as well. But there's a lot of self-censorship. So let's set aside the bias people, where there's just super in Seattle, super leftists, and they're just going to be biased. And the Seattle Times is one of the worst offenders. Lately, they've gone off a cliff. So you set aside that. How does a reasonable person end up putting out such blatantly unfair news? I believe there's a lot of self-censorship. It's one of the biggest problems in the media, where you have this morning meeting or afternoon meeting where you're going out to do, your stories for the day. And you know a story you want to bring up, but you're not even going to bring it up because it's going to be, you're going to get the looks, you're going to get the questions, your editor won't want to do it. So I think one of the biggest issues is self-censorship, where, hey, I want to do this story about COVID vaccines and how really this doesn't make any sense. But, I'm just too scared to say that in a room full of people in Seattle. So self-censorship. Now, do I believe that there are newsrooms where people are explicitly told, no, we're killing that story? Absolutely. I just can't say that it happened to me personally.
Well, I think you might be a little bit of an outlier. You've always been a little bit independent, I think. Yeah. And the fact that you even had your own show that sort of was based on that. Here's a take. Yeah, I'm not surprised they didn't tell you.
Yeah, that. In the story, and it was a little terrifying, I was told. But the story selection, as an example, King 5 did a story the other day on people after the 4th of July who were lighting off fireworks in downtown Seattle. And one of them had come and hit a woman. And, that's awful. That's fine if you want to do a news story. The problem with that is 2 weeks before that, Antifa was lighting off massive explosives and fireworks right outside the federal building in downtown Seattle. They were throwing them under people's cars as they drove by. Do you think King 5 was out there doing like a live report on all?
Right.
No. So you see the story selection and the angle, and a lot of that happens with editors, assignment editors, news directors.
Right.
Yeah.
Look, I was in the middle of 2020, 2021 riots, night after night after night after night. I was almost there as much as you were. There is absolutely no question that the coverage of those riots was blatantly biased, unfair, and untrue in many cases. We were out there every night. Officers were being assaulted day after day after day. Anything that happened was viewed as not that big of a deal, sort of downplayed, whatnot. Then, juxtapose that against, 4 Proud Boys in a truck, and it is literally the end of the world in Seattle.
Yes.
And it just was not accurate, and that's the part that frustrates cops. Is they just want journalists to represent the truth so that we're all operating off the same sheet of music, and that's sort of that big disconnect sometimes, and it's unfortunate. You were talking about producers and editors, never shutting down a story or this and that, but I just a counter experience to that was in the late 80s, early 90s. Thank you for pointing out how old I am, but I was a bike cop. Back in the days when bike cops started, and we would do, it was the best job in the world, by the way, but part of what we would do, we would, take photos with with tourists, and maybe a journalist or two, but mostly tourists, and then like 5 minutes later would be in a foot chase with some, robbery suspects. So it was fantastic. But we would also do a lot of drug buy cases in downtown Seattle and CPOPs and stuff, where we would deploy an undercover. We'd have undercover officers go out and buy drugs. We'd have observers. We'd have bike cops, swoop in and make arrests. And one of the local news agencies wanted to cover it. And it was, there was a gentleman that was the sort of the crime reporter for this agency. He came to us, said, hey, we want to do this. The powers that be approved it. They came out. They had camera crews up in buildings and down on the street with us. They watched us do this spy bust, and there was some, good stuff, a lot of, drama, good TV. And we never saw the thing. We never saw it played on the news. And we saw that guy, and he was downtown a lot doing like crime stuff. We saw him a couple months later, and they said, hey, whatever happened to that story? And he said, they killed it. I said, well, why'd they kill it? Well, they did not like the ethnic makeup of the folks involved. So because it cast a negative light. Well, our perspective was, we're not saying that everybody is this or everybody is that, but the reality of what's going on at Third and Bell is the reality of what's going on at Third and Bell. And you either report truth or you don't report truth. So the censorship and the editing of truth is frustrating, because that's where I think the disconnect happens between folks that are mired in the work in the field and the electorate that makes the decisions about the folks that fund those things.
I also think that there's a real lack of transparency in leadership, that it's very hard to get the accurate story out there because people aren't answering the questions in a forthright way.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah. It is. And it was interesting. I mean, as you can imagine, I wasn't really onboarded. I don't know anything about government or how to do this. And so I'm just going about my business the way I always did in the nonprofit sector. And the first press conference I did, and I've told Eric, I mean, I raised kids ahead of TV, but the last couple of years, I didn't. I have stayed just completely outside of popular culture and the media. And I didn't, I had been in Seattle a few years, like 2010 to 2015 in there, but again, did not participate, didn't know who anybody was. And so that first press conference, I didn't even really realize what it was. there were cameras. I didn't know that I was going to talk. So it's kind of funny now looking back. I mean, I went full Amy speak. In fact, Eric's standing behind me, right? We had just met. Yeah, we had just met. And like the day we met, we were together. So this is 5 days later. And he said after that first presser, because he didn't know me very well, he was like, I can't tell if you're a liberal conservative or a conservative liberal, which I thought was very funny. But what I keep hearing about is the way I was taking the questions. I'm just a teacher, and I'm trying to, I kept saying, does this make sense? Do you understand? Because I'm getting asked about outcomes. I'm like, I'm not going to have outcomes. I'm about adding 6 social workers to a few blocks. Downtown, I got no system. I don't have 24/7 detox. And I was really trying to teach that, why it is the way it is. I remember Jonathan Cho, I had no idea who he was. He asked me after, he said, can I ask you a few more questions? I'm like, yeah. So he starts rolling footage and he's asking me questions and I'm answering them. And I think it probably made everybody very nervous looking back. But I was very clear with my boss at the time, I am a public servant and anyone in this city who wants to talk to me, I will talk to. And I also feel like there's safety in that, right? I mean, if I am putting out as much information as transparently as I can, it's a lot less likely that I'm going to be misrepresented or the program is. And I actually think now, in year 3, I think I've been treated better across the board, probably than anybody else in a similar position. Because I think folks disagree with me, but they know I genuinely care and they understand what I'm trying to do. So it didn't offend me. Like the first stranger story, the headline was, Seattle's alternative to police involves police. And I called the reporter after. I was like, that was freaking funny. But I thought it was a fair story. It was a fair criticism to say, what are you doing? This is basically another version of co-response. And again, I know Jason Rance. I know everyone sort of across the spectrum, and I'm not offended by those perspectives. And I think that's part of it. I'm not trying to figure out who I line up with. I don't really relate to anyone necessarily, but I think we all should care about human suffering.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's issues that have been made political that are not political, and it's a real travesty. The homeless crisis, which is a drug crisis and a mental health crisis. There's so many things that I could point out that have been really sad to watch become politicized and have these media environments where you've got conservative media that has branched off and is a thing because they weren't welcome or didn't fit in mainstream news. And and I can give some examples. I kind of want to test the limits of whether you'll air this episode because I'm like,
God,
I promise you, we'll air. We
I mean, I'm just giving you some examples of how the manipulation happened. I mean, we all know how the manipulation happens on homelessness. I mean, we have this situation where it is very clearly, almost without exception, a drug crisis, and you might disagree, a drug crisis and a mental health crisis.
I talk about that every day.
And I mean, you might have the rare instance where somebody truly is escaping domestic violence, is absolutely down on their luck, had no safety net whatsoever, and finds themselves on the streets. If you're telling me we can't help that person with $700 million every year dedicated to homelessness, then you're lying to me, and you're stealing it, you're putting it somewhere. Where is it going? But you see the media, the mainstream media, continue to peddle this narrative that's pushed by the former governor and the current governor and the King County executive and everyone in between, that this is a housing crisis that will be fixed if only we built more homes. My dad died homeless. He died in a cheap motel room, lifetime of addiction. He had a home, he had a family. Putting him under a roof, he just would have died under the roof. Like put him in a $10 million mansion, he would have died in a $10 million mansion. So it's just this total fallacy, but somehow the mainstream media has succeeded, and I think in working with Democrats, is painting anyone who dissents from that as somehow like less, what is the word I'm looking for? Less enlightened about how society works. And then there's little things that really, truly bother me that, the immigration crisis. I'm fine. We can't have a nuanced conversation about anything. The media doesn't allow nuance, right? Like this is the only type of setting you can have nuance. And you see this ridiculous coverage, like the immigration crisis. I think most Americans feel like, hey, we want people here from other countries. That's what America is all about. Like, you got to come in through the legal avenues. Are we in favor of rounding up people who've been here for 30 years, haven't committed any new crimes? Should that be the priority? Probably not. But then you see stories and it only serves to divide us, like the Seattle Times. Anytime there's an illegal alien arrested, they call him like a Kirkland man, the guy who killed the Washington State Patrol trooper. What do they call him? Washington man. It's like, no, now you're just pissing people off. Like that's not a Washington man. It's a illegal Mexican national came here illegally, committed multiple law violations, was protected by our sanctuary policies, killed a cop, and you're calling him a Washington man.
Right.
The teacher in Kirkland who came in on I know we're going far afield, but who came in on a tourist visa and just decided to stay and then got a job teaching kids. He's only been here 6 years and the Seattle Times is calling him a Kirkland man.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, you have to be kidding me. Give me a break. There was a news story out of Portland. This is where I'm like, please edit it out or don't air the episode.
We have never edited anything, I
Well,
don't think.
you haven't had me in. The news media with this is one of the things that sent me far right too, is the radical gender ideology. Like, if you can't be honest to me about what someone's gender is, I'm not going to believe you about anything else.
Right.
Like, I'm all for respecting people. Like, if I don't know the mysteries of the universe. If you're an adult and you want to live as whatever you want to live,
100%.
I'm mostly libertarian. Cool. You do you, like, live your life, be happy. I love that for you. But when you try to force me to believe things that are falsehoods, or else I'm a bigot, like, that's where you lose me. And I was watching a story out of Portland where they were saying the police are on the hunt for a woman who assaulted, multiple people in downtown Portland brutally, like assaulted a baby and a man with a knife and all this. Wasn't a woman. It was a hulking 250-pound dude. And the media is saying it's a woman while showing us a picture of
Right.
a massive man
Right.
who was dressed as a woman.
Right.
That's the stuff that bothers me. If we can't just agree on, as the media, that we're going to share truths with people, even if it might offend some individuals, then I just don't know how we come up with a media ecosystem that we can all agree is working well.
Well, I think that issue alone, and I think polling showed that issue alone was one of the main drivers of Trump's.
It's like an 80-20
reelection.
issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, you can't tell me. I mean, it's the most fundamental thing. Like babies know, like, not babies, but, first graders, kindergartners know the difference between boys and girls. And now I'm 60 and you're going to tell me I don't know anymore? I mean, it's an absurdity.
Well, to be frank, you've got a police chief putting pronouns in his bio.
Well,
He's like a 60-year-old man and he says
you mean
he, him, his,
my
whatever.
former
Sure, yes.
police department, which I'm very proud of. I love my police department.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. I'm like,
I never had
breaking
pronouns.
me.
I never had pronouns in any of them. I never had pronouns because I wasn't confused.
Because look, if you put on a dress tomorrow and
I'm
you
still a dude.
wanted me to call you Aaron, I would say, hey, nice to meet you.
what I will say is, I think there are a lot of trans leaders who have said this is what we're getting wrong. That when you think about love is love, and you think about when progress has been made, it's been about respecting differences, right?
Oh,
and
100%.
saying, like, you do you, but I love my person like you love your person.
Yeah.
So I have heard people acknowledge that we always run into trouble when it's like, you have got to believe and line up with exactly what I believe.
Yeah.
I do put, back to the, homelessness as a housing crisis, I put a lot of onus on academia and research.
Yeah.
We had Amy King on. I think she is one of the most articulate about, yes, we have a housing problem. Of course we do. And we know, again, your example, of course we have people who are homeless, who don't have their own address because of shit that happened, right? Medical events, escaping DV, all of these things. But generally, that's not who we're seeing. And that is absolutely true. But I know there are academics who push this, that if you just build more, and then again, true clinicians and doctors and people in the space, they know that's not right. They do. And all the nonprofit providers I know, all the leaders, there's actually consensus. That, we were just talking to Nicole Alexander, who's a co-lead, who, again, has broken her own cycles. But she talks about that you got to get someone indoors, that this is that low barrier idea. Can I get you indoors, but start you on a path to recovery?
Have to have accountability
That's
in the
right.
moment.
That's right. And I
100%.
say all the time, I'm just trying to remind people what we know about changing behavior.
Yeah.
And there always has to be cause and effect. Always, no matter what we're talking about. You have to have a consequence. It has to be that this works better than this over time. And so I think that there's consensus, but it's interesting. I think even though maybe the providers all believe that, there's still a disconnect with electeds and policymakers who are saying things that were popular, in 2018. And I remember the first time I talked about involuntary referrals, everyone thought I was going to get fired. I mean, really, they thought, like, you cannot say that. But on the contrary, I'm trying to actually illuminate what's happening, and when people decline, why, and when they change, why. And again, you and I have talked a lot about fentanyl. I reject the notion that that is a recreational drug. It's a lethal drug. And everybody I know who's on the other side of it has said, no day of the week would I have elected to get clean. Like, this overwhelmed my brain.
Yeah.
There were no cogent moments at all. I was going to die. And, so I think that's really complex. Again, it is nuanced.
I think they have cogent moments. There's just not a
on
lot of them.
fentanyl?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think there's people that contemplate,
Well,
I don't want this drug's going to kill me and I don't want to die.
Yeah.
But then I think those
the
cogent
next-
moments are then overwhelmed by the desire to use.
You know what? I know that that's right, what you just said, because I just ran into one of the Health One case managers, and she said that word is getting out about like Sublocade, the injectable, that people are asking her for it. Like they'll see her and say, can I get the shot?
Yeah.
Which is, God, it's the saddest thing in the world that she can't just say, yep, come with me.
Yep.
Well, I think to your point about the politicization, that's a hard word to say, of issues that shouldn't necessarily be so. You talked about accountability. It's one of my, there has to be accountability, but that does not mean the absence of support. There has to be support, but that does not mean the absence.
He is now. You see that? I think.
Look, you can take credit.
Just wearing him down.
Wearing him down.
Wearing
So
him
many
down.
words, Brandi. So many
No
words.
one's worn me down
So
yet.
many
I'm not
words.
turning into a wuss. No, I'm just
Okay, I am okay, but no, I just think, and I don't. I think that is a strong position to take. Look, we do. They are people. We do care about these folks. We have sat right in that chair. We've had a number of people that used to be the person slumped over on Third and Pine, and it are now contributing greatly to society. They're high functioning. They've overcome, and all of them cite purpose and dignity, and a lot. And all these folks that we talk to, they have integrity. Like. To get
level.
through that, they have integrity that is far superior to a lot of the folks just walking around that haven't had that experience. And so, but accountability and support. I mean, we were just talking on an earlier podcast about, some folks have been in prison for a while. They don't even know how, and maybe they're homeless. They don't have an email address and a laptop where they can sign up to get their Social Security card and whatnot to dial into services and treatment and stuff. So there needs to be support to that, but there also needs to be accountability where you've got to step up and take care of yourself, which then produces dignity within yourself, because now you're contributing to your own future. And so we've politicized it. So it's either support 100%, no accountability, or it's all accountability.
Law and order,
and that's
punishment,
not, we need to abandon that. We need to work together and bring these programs. There's a variety of programs that have shown massive success and gotten extraordinary results. And invariably they get unfunded, and we continue to fund things that have questionable.
Yeah, I was joking earlier. Everything that I promote and shine light on because it works, we divest from. I'm like, am I jinxing it? What is going on?
Stop.
You should be like,
gotta stop
hey,
talking,
we should really put a lot of money into harm reduction. Let's put
all
all
about
our money into harm reduction. Let's do that. No, but what I think what you guys are both really good at, and what needs to happen is a movement toward talking about solutions. Like, we know what it's not. We know it's not a housing crisis. What are we going to do? And you guys are good at that. And the reason I bring up some of those cultural issues is not to trigger you and see if you'll take down the show, but we can't agree on simple truths anymore. We are it's everything is black and white, and I'm not even going to discuss this with you. It's like, you call that a man, or like, you're a bigot. You just agree that, and until more people say, I'm not playing that game anymore. Like, no, we're going to go back. We're going to have reasonable conversations, fact-based conversations, and if it means we have to shut out the far fringes, then so be it.
Wow, we're having so much fun talking to Brandi Kruse. We look forward to talking with her more, so stand by for part 2.
Yeah, I'm not surprised we had to break that into 2 parts.
Well,
I
there's
knew
a lot
we'd want to
going
talk to
on.
her.
There's a lot going on with her, and you two teaming up against me.
It's just a lot of words.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's worthy of a part 2.
The Bombardin podcast is a Barden Squared production. Executive producers are Eric Barden and Amy Barden, and video and audio production of the Bombardin podcast is by Thread Theory Creative.